5 times an old machine was brought back to life. Hello and welcome back to Top Tech. On this channel, we investigate the hidden technological processes that make modern life possible. In today's video, we will be taking a look at one of the hottest trends currently breaking the internet. It's cool, it's hip, and some of you might even find it mesmerizing. We're talking about the marvelous world of antique machine restoration. If you've been binging YouTube videos recently, then it's a given you've come across a number of interesting clips showcasing a bunch of folks working hard to restore an antique machine back to its glory days. These entertaining videos usually emphasize on the meticulous craftsmanship that's put in during the restoration process, and that's exactly what we plan to show you. But beforehand, don't forget to click on that subscribe button, push that notification bell, and slap this video with a gigantic thumbs up. Number 5. Restoring a gear reducer from the 70s. So, what made machine restoration a favorite pastime for many enthusiasts around the world? It's got to be the process. Take for example this old gear reducer right here. Our restorer kicks things off by cleaning the exterior of the gear reducer to remove all the rust that has formed. With so many years of neglect, probably rusting away in someone's shed, it's bound to have corroded parts. The restorer then moves on to remove all the bolts from the gearbox to examine their condition. This way, he'll be able to tell whether he needs to repair or reverse engineer the required parts. The parts are then subjected to failure analysis after complete disassembly to evaluate the component's wear and damage. After this is done, the gears, shafts, and gaskets are repaired back to their original equipment manufacturer state. The internal components, as well as the housing, are cleaned once more in preparation for assembly. The gearbox is then reassembled before it is sandblasted and painted. Now the gear reducer looks as good as new. It can even be taken to auction for appraisal depending on whether the enthusiast wants to sell it or not. Number 4. Restoring a 1930s 5-inch Japanese television set. In days past, CRTs were the life and face of television. Just take a look at this 1930s TV set that was sold extensively during the height of Imperial Japanese rule. So, how does this enthusiast go about restoring it? Before doing any electrical repairs, he starts by cleaning the television set. He removes the chassis from the cabinet, takes out all the valves, and removes the cover of the high-voltage case. As for cleaning, the restorer uses a dishwashing detergent mixed with water, which he sprays on the chassis. Equipped with a toothbrush, he scrubs out the grease, grime, and dirt. He then completes the cleaning process by washing all the soap off with pure water. You shouldn't worry about using water for rinsing. It won't damage the components as long as the paper labels are protected. After rinsing, the chassis is left to dry for several hours. Ensure not to apply AC mains power to the chassis until it is completely dry. Secondly, you will need to replace the paper capacitors. For such an old TV, many of the paper capacitors are in poor condition, and many more might spoil once mains power is applied. Therefore, all of them should be replaced before you move on to the next step. While the process of capacitor replacement might feel daunting, it will save you time and money in the long run as debugging becomes much simpler. While replacing capacitors, ensure they are of the same voltage or higher in terms of rating. For such an old set, you can install new capacitors inside the old shell, but make sure not to reproduce any of the mica capacitors as they are usually still in good condition. Plus, the fact that they are normally in tuned circuits means that you have to realign the entire set. You don't want all that work, do you? After this, you can move on to install the picture tube. Start by measuring both the cathode voltage and grid voltage on the CRT. By shifting the brightness and contrast control, the idea is to get the grid voltage as close to but slightly below the cathode voltage. If the tube has an ion trap, rotate it and move it in and out until you get an image. The next step is to install the vertical frame oscillator, as well as the output tubes. Once this is done, try to obtain a raster with better linearity by debugging the circuit. Finally, install the rest of the tubes before connecting a VCR to the antenna input so that you can set it to be used to tune off-the-air cable channels. Once you have a picture, connect a speaker for sound, especially because speakers of such an ancient television can be damaged beyond repair. Number 3. Restoring a DiResta Winchester 1873. An American classic, the DiResta Winchester 1873 is a relic of post-Civil War American life. Indeed, to go about restoring such an antique requires utmost patience and precision. As you can see, our restorer starts by cleaning said rifle. A good cleanser to use in this process is turpentine, which is a much safer and milder cleaner, especially on the stock of the gun. The miniature metallic parts of the rifle were cleaned using a brass brush. Brass brushes are much stiffer and tougher to eliminate the collected scale and rust, while still not scratching the surface of the gun. Ensure the metal components are in the stock while cleaning. You can then use a mainspring vise to remove the mainspring from the lock without breaking it. Once you remove the barrel, you will observe that most guns from this era have a deep pitting on the underside. This is not unusual, as many military arms at the time were not disassembled by troops. The only maintenance done back in the day was wiping down the outside surfaces and cleaning the bore. Troops would seldom separate the stock from the barrel or even disassemble the lock. Only armorers were authorized to do that specialized work. You can then move to cleaning the stock of the gun with turpentine, which can be quite a slow process, taking plenty of hours, maybe even days. The restorer uses a toothbrush to continually wash down on the stock surface until a majority of the crud was softened and removed. Once the stock is cleaned, the restorer repairs any minor cracks in the gun. The cracks can be flushed out with a gun scrubber to remove as much of the oil and dirt as possible. For the cracks, you can use superglue to bond the wood together. You can clean the bore with a standard bore brush and rod. Once it's been cleaned, you can oil it lightly to prevent any more rusting from taking place. Once this is complete, the rifle is assembled to make it pristine and quite the collectible, if I may say so. Number 2. Restoring 1890s Blacksmith Forge. Before the Industrial Revolution, blacksmith forges were the focal point of metal construction in medieval times, all the way to the late 1800s. So, how do you revive one of the most antique collections and bring it back to its glory days? Just like every other restoration process, the restorer begins by cleaning off the rust formed on parts such as the pan and the firepot. Thankfully, the firepot doesn't rust as much because it is made out of cast iron, as compared to the pan made out of mild steel. The firepot is also attached to a cast iron ash collector and a curved air shaft that directly connects to a hand-operated blower. The blower body is made from cast iron that's divided into two halves. Within the blower body is an impeller attached to the shaft, and the shaft is then connected to a series of gears that create a gentle turn of the handle to speed the impeller. The blower itself is shaped like a volute, allowing air inside the round body to move through a side opening and into a narrow air shaft, before heading right into the firepot for the coal to burn. The restorer then cuts out any of the rust that's formed mostly on the pan and welds new metal inside the forge's bottom. The rusted legs are also cut free from the pan's body to enable welding of a new frame with 4 new legs. An axle with 2 wheels is also welded to enable rolling of the forge from one location to another when tilted, but resting on all 4 legs when seated. All the other cast iron parts of the blower, firepot and shaft are broken down to remove the rust as well. Once the rust is removed, the parts are oiled and reassembled to get the forge in fine condition once more. Number 1. Restoring an 1886 Mercedes-Benz. So we've come to the piece de resistance of our video. And what better way to cap things off than seeing an 1886 Mercedes-Benz restored to perfection. Generally, the restoration of a classic such as this is divided into 3 main parts: mechanical, body, and upholstery. It is advised that you work on the upholstery of this classic in a relatively clean environment. Your basement or workshop should do the trick. As for the mechanical parts, heck, even your garage works, as you'll need to get down and dirty. You'll first need to disassemble the various metallic parts and add a new layer of chrome to them. with so much time past, a number of these parts may have lost their flair and luster, and thus need to be brightened up once more. As for the suspension, you'll probably want to find the spare parts, especially if the rust has eaten into the transmission and suspension components. But finding spare parts for an 1886 Mercedes-Benz, let alone having them custom built for you, can be quite expensive. Nevertheless, once the transmission has been rebuilt, you can install the already painted frame and take it for a test drive to work out any bugs the engine might still have. The earlier, the better. Once you've determined that everything is working smoothly, you can reupholster the seats, restore the paint job back to its flourishing nature, and reinstall all the other essential parts of this vintage vehicle. Finally, take it out for a spin. Or better yet, once you've restored it to conquer level, you can put it up for appraisal and later auction it to get your money's worth. When all is said and done, there's nothing more appealing than bringing a vintage vehicle back from the dead. So, do you have any items sitting idly in your backyard worth restoring? If so, why don't you give it a try? It's a great DIY project you can try out this summer. Plus, it might just be worth the while once it goes up for appraisal on an auction site. Let us know what you plan to restore and the outcome once you give it a go in the comments section down below. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a like to support the channel. Once again, thanks for watching.